بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. We continue after a 2-week break on the topic of the rules of purification. The rules of purification, ahkam at-Taharah. So just a brief review of what we covered in the previous session. So we talked about the ruling on gold and silver vessels. We said that it is haram to do what? Any use of them. Right? We said not just eating and drinking, any use. Using it in any way, even just keeping it in your house, is not allowed. Due to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do not drink from gold and silver vessels or eat from such dishes. They are for them, the disbelievers in this life, and for us in the hereafter. We also talked about soldering with gold or silver. And we said that when it comes to the silver, there's a bit of details. If there's a need for it, it's allowed, and it's a small amount. If it's a large amount and there's a need, it's allowed but disliked. If it's for decoration and it's a small amount, disliked. If it's a large amount for decoration, unlawful. All right, that was for silver. For gold, categorically forbidden. And then this hadith is the evidence of allowing the silver. All right, we also talked about what about vessels from other precious minerals besides gold and silver? Allowed or not? Allowed. All right, because we don't have any text that indicates prohibition. Vessels of disbelievers, allowed, but recommended to do what? To wash it. All right, based on the hadith, wash them and eat from them. Because it can be maybe impure due to alcohol, pork, and so on. All right, we also went over the 2 main types of purification. We have purification from najas. What is najas? Impurities, right? The physical impurities. All right, hadath we'll talk about later. Hadath is the spiritual state of being impure. And then we went over a number of different types of impure substances. Wine, right? Dogs and pigs, flowing blood, urine and feces of animals and human beings, carrion, maita. With the exception, the carrion being exception of carrion of human being. This is considered pure. A human being, even when he dies or she dies, the body is still pure. All right? So this is not included in the ruling of being impure, the human being. Fish is an exception as well. If you find a fish dead, it doesn't take the ruling of maita, all right, or carrion. So the fish, once it's in the ocean, it's allowed to eat it. Locusts, another exception. All right, pre-seminal fluid, any liquid that comes from the private parts that we mentioned, with the exception of semen. And we said the reason for that exception is that this is the substance in which we were created from. And because we were created from this substance, and the human being is pure, therefore the substance is considered pure. This is the reasoning the scholars give, and there is a debate on this. Any part of the animal that is separated from it while alive. The milk of animals with flesh cannot be eaten, such as the milk of donkeys, right? It will be impure because you cannot eat a donkey. All right, then we also talked about discernible najasa and indiscernible. That was the last thing we covered. Anybody remember what that is? The difference between the two? Discernible najasa and indiscernible. Right. So yeah, the discernible, you can detect it, right? It has a mass. You can either see it, you can smell it. So that is the discernible. I think it froze for a second. Hold on. Okay. So it has perceptible mass, quality like colors or smells. And then you have the indiscernible najasa. This is the one that has lost its properties, such as being dried up, has no material trace left. It's still considered to be najasa. All right, just because the properties go away doesn't mean that it has gone away. So, if for example somebody got urine on their clothing, and then hours pass and it dried up, you no longer could detect that urine. It is still there in terms of the ruling. So you still need to wash that part of the clothing with the water, even though it is no longer traceable or detected. All right, the next thing we'll talk about is another way of categorizing najasa is we can say it is three types: heavy, light, and medium. Right? Heavy, light, and medium. What's the difference between these three? It goes back to what is the method of purification. If purification from the najasa, from the impurity, requires a lot of steps and requires extra effort, then we're going to call this heavy najasa. If the purification process is reduced, it's not as much effort involved, then it's light najasa, light impurity. And medium would be everything else. All right, so heavy najasa, this is called in Arabic najasa mughallada. And this is the najasa of dogs and pigs. So why do we call this heavy? Because to purify from the najasa of dogs and pigs, it is not enough to just wash one time. All right, if like for example, the saliva of a dog gets on your clothing, you can't just wash it one time and that's it. Right? You have to wash it how many times? 7 times. One of those times has to be with soil or dirt. All right? So because it requires extra steps to purify, we call it heavy najasa. So the reason why you have to wash it 7 times is because the impurity is heavy. It's a very heavy impurity. And so because of that, it is required extra steps. So you have to wash it 7 times. And this is based on the hadith. طهور إناء أحدكم إذا ولغ فيه الكلب أن يغسله 7 مرات إحداهن بالتراب. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in hadith that the purification of one of your vessels, if the dog saliva gets into it, is to wash it 7 times. The first time is with the dirt or the soil. The hadith there's different narrations. Some of them mention the first washing has to be with the soil. Others mention the last. Some of them just say one of them has to be with soil. So, but the best thing is to do it, the first washing with the soil. So how do you do that first washing with the soil? Anybody want to take a guess? How would you wash it? Okay. So rub it with the soil. Okay. Good. So that's one way of doing it. That's one way. You take the soil, you rub it into the area, and then you put the water on it afterwards. Another way is you put the water first, and then you rub the soil in afterwards. And the third way is to mix the water with the soil. It becomes like mud water, and then you wash it with that, and then the rest of the remaining times with regular water. All right, so the hadith mentions, and we covered this hadith previously, it talks about the dog. It doesn't say anything about the pig. So why are we saying najasa of dogs and pigs? Good, all right, the pigs are worse. All right, the pigs are worse. So by analogy, the pig, if the dog, you have to do this for the dog, then by analogy, we should also do this even more for the pig. All right, the pig is a lot dirtier animal. So this is called najasa mughallada, heavy najasa, because it requires extra steps to do so. Has anybody ever, any saliva of the dog ever got on their clothing? Okay, maybe. Okay, actually, I was in the car shop the other day, and there was a big dog comes in, and I could see like the nose, the nose is kind of wet, and it got on my jacket. So when I went home, I washed it 7 times with the soil. So if that happens, you have to do so. Yeah.
But the saliva of the dog can cure a wound. The bacteria react with the other bacteria, cures it out faster.
Maybe, but regardless, even if it has some health benefits, it's still impure. Yeah.
What if it's not the saliva? Let's say the dog just touches.
So any part of the dog, but in order for it to transfer, it has to be moist, right? So it doesn't have to be the saliva. It could be even the blood or any the excrement of the animal, all right, or any of the moisture of the animal. But in order for it to kind of really transfer over, it needs to be kind of wet to do so. All right, if it's dry, then it's not really going to transfer over. But it's not just the saliva. Any part of the whole part of the animal is impure.
So like if you step on
Yeah, yeah. Then you have to purify it that way. Yeah.
Shaykh, the American people, look what they do with dogs. They kiss the dog, they sleep with the dog, they do everything.
Yeah. So the dog is an impure animal, and the pig is also impure. All right, but the Americans and the disbelievers in general, they eat the pork, and they love the dogs. But you know, even in this culture today, even though they love these two animals, when you want to insult somebody, what do you say? A pig or a dog, right? If you want to insult somebody and you call them a dog, is that a compliment or an insult? So they know themselves that these two animals are no good, right? But then at the same time, they still eat it and they still keep it as pets. But, you know.
Practically speaking, a lot of people are going to wash things 7 times, right?
Yeah.
Just, if you get something dirty, put it in the wash, right? So is there an analogy made to washing things 7 times? Could you just put it in the wash, put some detergent on it, and you're fine?
In the washing machine, you mean? The washing machine is a bit of a different ruling, because it depends on how it's being washed. So, like if the water is filling up, and then you put a garment in there that's impure, what does it do to the water? What can it do to the water? It can make it impure. So on those grounds, it can be a bit different. So it might be best to purify it first, then put it in the wash. All right, so this is heavy najasa. Because it's called heavy, because you have to do extra steps to purify it. And then we have light najasa. This is called in Arabic najasa mukhaffafa. Najasa mukhaffafa. And this is the urine of a baby boy with 2 conditions. That this baby boy is less than 2 lunar years. And that this baby boy is only fed with breast milk. So with these 2 conditions, the urine of the baby boy is considered light, and the purification is by sprinkling water. So you don't have to do a full washing of it. You sprinkle water in the general area of where the urine got. And this is based on hadith of Qais, where she said that she brought a young son of hers who had yet to eat solid food to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the boy urinated on his garment, so he called for water and then he sprinkled it without washing. Okay, so this is the hadith, is the proof that the urine of the baby boy is light najasa. You just have to sprinkle the water. You don't have to do a full washing of it. Now, where do we get that he has to be less than 2 lunar years? Where do we get that from?
They don't grow teeth until they're tiny too.
Okay, huh? Somebody else said something? But why 2 years? Good. Nursing is 2 years, right? The Quran mentions fi amain, 2 years. So after 2 years, even if they still breastfeed, that's not the official period of breastfeeding. So 2 years, and only fed with breast milk, meaning that they're not eating anything else. All right. Now maybe they might eat something else, but the breast milk is their only source of nutrition. So sometimes the baby might, you might feed the baby a mouthful of something, but they're not eating that for nutrition. They're just eating it for, just because they're curious to eat. So that's okay. But as long as the baby is being exclusively fed with breast milk for nutrition purposes, then this would qualify. Yeah.
Is there any extension in terms of girls?
Good question. Is there extension for the girls? So the hadith only mentions the boy. Can we make the analogy? I think some scholars have made that analogy. However, other scholars have mentioned that the reason why this is an exception is due to the nature of the boy. The nature of anatomy of the boy is that when he urinates, it will go all over the place, right? And that's not the case for the girl, So the baby boy, due to the nature of the male anatomy, when he urinates, it's going to go all right, left, and center. And because of that, it becomes a little bit more difficult to purify. And so the Sharia has come and has made it easier, but you just have to sprinkle the water. We don't have that problem with the girl. So due to that, it is only for the boys, the baby boys. And the last category of najasa is medium najasa. This is called in Arabic najasa mutawassita. Najasa mutawassita, and this is everything else. All right, everything else, besides the previous two categories, you purify this by pouring water over it one time and removing its trace. Right, so every other najasa, and this is the ones we went over previously, right? The blood and whatever else we covered. Everything else would be considered to be medium najasa, and the purification from that is to wash it one time with water, removing its trace. All right, so this is called the medium najasa because it's not the heavy, it doesn't require those extra steps, and it's not the light, which is just sprinkling the water. You have to actually wash this off. All right, so this is another way of categorizing impurities, najasa. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay, purifying hides of carrion. So we know that when an animal dies, it becomes impure. So if we want to make use of the animal's skin, for example, then there's a process that it has to go through to purify that carrion or the skin of that carrion. And this is called tanning, right? It is called tanning. And what is tanning? It's essentially to remove the hide's moisture, right? So that animal, when it dies, it has moisture, excess moisture. So removing that moisture using a pungent, acrid substance, remove that moisture, and this is what tanning is. So tanning, and this is in Arabic, is called dabgh. It applies to the hides of all animals except for dogs and pigs. So dogs and pigs, it cannot be purified, right? The skin of dogs and pigs cannot be purified, even if you do the process of tanning. But every other animal, you can remove the impurity by this process of tanning. Anybody ever did this process or observed it? Okay. I don't think it's not really common in our society, yeah.
I mean, it happens way up the other bridge.
Yeah.
We're not in touch with the people.
Yeah. So the proof for that is the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, when the hide is tanned, it becomes pure. إِذَا دُبِقَ الْإِهَابُ فَقَدْ طَهُرَ. إِذَا دُبِقَ الْإِهَابُ فَقَدْ طَهُرَ. When the hide is tanned, it becomes pure. And just there's an extra detail, which they say that after tanning, you still have to wash it. All right? After tanning, you still have to wash it with water. And the reason for that is because they say that when you do the tanning with the treatment, that thing becomes impure by coming in contact with so whatever substance you're using to purify the skin, right? That substance, because it's touching the carrion, it itself becomes impure. So because now it has become impure, even when the hide is purified, it's still impure because it became in contact with something impure. So they just wash it off one more time to make it pure.
Pungent smell and acrid to make it more, it wouldn't smell that much.
Yeah. Right. All right, so we talked about the types of najasa. And there's yeah.
So just going back to the hide of the pig.
Yeah.
So, any use of the hide is because the hide is impure. Any use of the hide, whether it's to make bags or
Yeah, it would be considered unlawful. Unlawful. Right? And we had mentioned this before. When something is unlawful, then just using it in any way, it becomes unlawful as well. So we cannot use the hide. There might be some scholars who allow this by the tanning process, right? But the view we go by is that it is, for the dogs and pigs, it is impure even if it is undergoes the tanning process. Wallahu a'lam. right, now we have types of najasa that are excused. So we have the principle of ease. In the Sharia, we have a principle of ease, which dictates that some najasa is excused, right? Due to either impossibility of removing them. There's some najasa that is just not possible to remove it. Or it's very difficult to avoid, almost impossible to avoid. So due to this, there are a certain amount of impurities, najasat, that are excused, they're overlooked. So even if they do get on the person, it will be overlooked and excused due to the hardship. Due to the hardship in either removing it or avoiding it to begin with. All right, so what are the types of najasa that are excused? Number one is slight splashes of urine that are not discernible. All right, so very tiny amount. And you might use the bathroom and then a tiny amount might splatter, you can't even see it. But it gets in your clothes. We're not responsible for that. Okay, this is, even though it might get in your clothes, because you cannot see it, you cannot detect it, it is very difficult to avoid, right? Especially if you are, you use the toilet and it might bounce off the thing and splatter on. You do your best to avoid it, but there might be that slight splash of it.
Also the flushing the toilet.
Yeah, even that.
The water gets
Yeah, and you might not be able to. Now, obviously, if you do, you are able to detect it, then that's a different story, right? But this is talking about slight splashes that you cannot detect. It's not discernible. Then, in that case, this is considered to be excused. Right? This is considered to be excused. All right. Also, slight amounts of blood, very small amount of blood or pus, is considered to be excused. This is najasa that is excused. The blood of fleas, or the excrement of flies. Right? All these things that we're going to go over here, it comes back to one of these two things. It's either impossible to remove it, or it's very difficult to avoid. All right. So, like the flies everywhere, right? And it might have excrements going, and you might not be able to see it. So these things are overlooked. The blood of fleas, same thing. Yeah, blood and pus of wounds, right? Even if it is large, as long as it's from the same person, your own blood, right, or your own pus from a wound, and it's not the result of deliberate doing. You didn't cut yourself, right? So if a person is bleeding and there's a wound and there's a lot of blood flowing out, then this is, even though we said blood is an impurity, it is najis, this would be excused because this is something that is maybe difficult to avoid or even contain. So as long as the blood from that same person, a person's own blood, and it's not the result of deliberate doing, then the blood and pus of wounds, even if it's a large amount, it is considered to be excused.
Sheikh, I have a question.
Yeah.
I read a hadith about flies, right?
Flies, yeah.
Yeah, if a fly fell.
We're going to get to the hadith. That's coming at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, that's coming at the end. All right, come back to the blood. And the blood does not go beyond the normal area. Right, so a person has like a cut on their hand, and it's bleeding, and it doesn't spread to, let's say, the foot, all right, or any other chest or anything like that. It stays within the normal area. Then all this is overlooked, and so a person prays in that, this is still okay. All right, this is considered excused and overlooked. The dung of riding beasts that gets mixed with seeds when crushed. This is almost impossible to avoid. Right, animals that they use for riding, the horses and so on. The dung might get mixed with the seeds when they get crushed. It's almost impossible to avoid it. So this is excused and overlooked. The dung of farm animals that gets mixed with the milk during the milking process, as long as the milk is not changed. Right, this is also one of those things that a small amount might get inside. You maybe, yeah, you might want to drink it, of course, right, but you might not be able to detect it. It's a very small amount that might get mixed during the milking process, as long as the milk is not changed. Right? If the milk changes, then this is different. But this, once again, it comes back to these are things that are very difficult to avoid. Right? Because it's very difficult to avoid. Maybe today it might be modern methods might make it. Yeah. All right, excrement of fish in the water. All right, this is considered to be excused and overlooked. Droppings of birds in places where that they frequent. So there's a place, and they give examples here of the Haram of Mecca, Medina, Umayyad Grand Masjid, and maybe other places as well. The birds are everywhere, right? They're flying all over. You're praying in the courtyard of the Haram, and there's birds everywhere. And the droppings are going to come. It's almost impossible to avoid it. So this would be considered overlooked. Of course, you out of your own personal sanitation, you would want to remove it, right? Or wipe it off or wash it off. But if a person was to be, it falls on them, and they can still pray in it. This would be considered overlooked because the birds are almost always there, and it's almost impossible to avoid the droppings of the birds in places like this.
So, is alcohol considered to be impure, right?
Alcohol, yes.
Like, I mean, if there's some alcohol on a table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's impure, right? You're not drinking it, but you can't. You like playing with it, right? You know?
Well, the bottle or yeah,
Alcohol. So, like, somebody drops something.
the liquid, yes. Yeah.
So a lot of these examples make sense if you live like on a farm or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, right? But like none of us do.
Mm-hmm.
And like most people probably don't, right? That like in a place like this, right? So are there like similar type excuses, right, for city environments?
Okay, give it an example.
I'm on the train late at night, some guy comes in drinking a beer.
Okay.
And when he leaves the beer can. And the train's boom, 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 boom down the road, and then that beer can spills. So now you have beer on the floor. This
Okay.
is an example, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take the train after midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing good happens after midnight on the train. So now there's alcohol on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Moving around, right? Again, not a common thing, but like you'll find stuff like that happening. So like, people bring their dog on the train, right? Maybe the dog might drop something or whatnot, right? And then, then you step in that, right? So like, that isn't covered in stuff like this. But that's a more realistic example, I think, for like today's life, right?
So yeah.
Stuff like that similarly excused, right? Stuff that you cannot avoid, right? Given the principles
So
that you mentioned.
yeah, you cannot avoid it, and it's very common as well. So yeah, it has to be with those two conditions. So the alcohol on the train, how often does that happen, right? Does it happen enough? Is it something that every time you step on the train, is alcohol there?
Okay, somebody
Right.
throws up in the train, right?
Yeah, but how often is that, right? It has to be something that's always happening, right? Like the birds are always there. They're flying they're all always there.
Yeah, but like dung and like when you're milking, I mean, like who's milking animals, right?
Well, we don't live in a farm, right? But we can imagine that those who live in the farm, they would know the situation better than us. So these are things that are common, happening all the time, right? Or it's
Live in a rural setting.
yeah,
I'm talking about city settings.
right, yeah,
Similar examples.
yeah. But the example you gave is not something that's common, right? So it has to be something that's
Like people being in the street.
yeah. How often has anybody happened to anybody here? Okay, right. But we're not saying it doesn't happen, but it's something that if it happens once, yeah, it's not an everyday occurrence. Right, but you can avoid it as well too. Right, so it has to come down to that as well. You can avoid it if it's something you can avoid. Right, then this is when the excuse comes in.
Because I remember when I used to be in Manhattan, so many people used to go to Juma Salah. So the Masjid is crowded.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to read on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
You have to walk in there.
Mhm.
You have boys, boo, when they do it there, And you just come, some probably bring cardboard and stuff like that right there. And make a Juma Salah. Is that?
Yeah, you cover all the thing with your cardboard, so that's fine.
Well, yeah, if you do the cardboard, that would be considered. But we'll get to that actually. We'll get to that point. We'll come back to that point. It's going to come later on. Something very similar. All right, that which falls on the butcher's clothes. So a person who's a butcher, blood is going to get on his clothes, like, no matter what he does. Right? No matter what he does, it's going to get. If you ever looked at a butcher, right, you see his gown he wears, there's blood on it. So that which falls in a butcher's clothes, as long as it's not a very large amount, but a little bit of is overlooked, considered to be overlooked, because it's almost impossible for him to avoid that. All right, blood that is on meat. So So after the meat is slaughtered, the animal is slaughtered, and you drain the blood out, there's still blood that remains. All right, this is considered overlooked. So you don't necessarily have to have the steak, very well done, right? It could be a little bit of blood on it. Yeah, you had a question first. Yeah. If it's a little bit, right? If it's a little bit, yeah. Yeah. Mm.
That is on the meat.
Yeah. That's the blood that remains.
Right. That
Yeah.
remains on the meat.
Uh,
So same thing for like Qurbani, right? We handle the meat and some of that blood gets, not the blood from the actual sacrifice, but the blood from handling the meat that's on your clothes.
it would be the same thing if it's a small amount. Small amount, then it's considered to be overlooked. Of course, the best thing is to change your clothes when you're going to pray anyway, right? You wouldn't. Most people wouldn't pray in the same clothes that they were slaughtering in. But if it comes to that, then these rulings would apply. All right, the mouth of a child that has become mutanajjis. Mutanajjis means impure, due to vomiting, right? So this is something that occurs very often. When you have a baby, the baby is constantly, all right, spitting up or vomiting. And this vomit is considered to be impure. And sometimes it can become, it could go on the mother's clothing or her breast, and this would be considered overlooked because it happens very often. All right, this is what you had mentioned earlier. Whatever comes onto a person from the mud on the street. All right, so you're walking, and you can't really avoid walking in the mud or wherever the path is. You might be stepping on things you don't know what you're stepping on. All right, so these things are considered overlooked, all right? Because we're not going to analyze the entire, take a microscope and look at it before we walk anywhere, right? So we're walking in the street, and you're going to step on certain things. Now, obviously, you can see sometimes something this is like a dog excrement is there clearly. You avoid it, but there's other things that you might be stepping on. You don't even know what you're stepping on, but you have to walk. So in that case, whatever comes onto a person from the mud or just walking in the street, this would be considered to be excused and overlooked because it's very difficult to avoid it. You have to walk, all right? You have to get to where you need to get to. And in that process, you might be stepping on certain, a dog might have come and urinated 20 minutes ago, right? You can't even see it anymore or even detect it. These things would be overlooked because it's very difficult to avoid. All right, dead flesh that does not have any flowing blood when it falls in a liquid, as long as the liquid does not change. All right, so you have a dead flesh of basically like a fly or things like that. It doesn't have any flowing blood. It falls in the liquid as long as the liquid is not changed. The liquid is remaining how it is. And as long as it falls in by itself. All right, it falls in by nobody threw it inside. Falls in by itself, then this is considered to be okay and excused. And this is just the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if a fly falls into the vessel of any one of you, what should he do? Dip it in. Dip it in. And then remove it. For indeed, on one of its wings is a cure, and on the other is a malady or a sickness or disease. So this applies to the fly, and by analogy, any other insect that does not have flowing blood, right? And the reason is essentially because this is almost impossible to avoid, right? Especially in places where there's a lot of flies. The fly might come, and I'm sure we might have experienced that before. Most of us probably threw it away afterwards if the fly got into our tea or something. But Rasulullah says in hadith that if it gets inside, dip it inside fully, and then take it out, and then even though that fly is dead, it is impure. Impurity is excused because of the hadith. Yeah.
Like question, like we don't live where there's a lot of flies, right? There's
Mm.
no flies on the street, right?
Yeah.
But I can see in different settings, maybe there's more flies, right? So would something like this be contextual? Like if you have the means, right? If you live in a place where you can't avoid flies, then dip it, right?
Yeah.
If you live in a place where there's no flies and then a fly falls on your slice of pizza, right?
Mm-hmm. This is for liquids, right? This is not for food or anything. This is specifically for the liquid.
Yeah, so like say you're sipping some tea somewhere and a fly drops in your
Mhm.
tea, right? Since you have the means now to go get another cup of tea, right? Would you then say, okay, well, look, I have the means. My context isn't that context.
So
I can get another
yeah,
cup of tea.
so there's a principle which is that the original ruling might have been said in a specific context, but the ruling will remain even if that context does not apply anymore. Okay, so in those days maybe there was a lot of flies, so the hadith was mentioned in that context. We don't have another flies anymore. The ruling will still apply because the text still maintains its ruling. This text still maintains gives the ruling, right? And an example of that is travel, right? Back in the days, travel was difficult. So we had the dispensations of travel you can shorten and combine. Today there's no difficulty in travel, almost zero. Do we say that, well, the ruling doesn't apply anymore? No, the ruling still applies. Because the ruling, the hikmah of the ruling can change, but the ruling still remains. So the ruling might have originated because of a wisdom. Even if that wisdom is no longer present, the ruling still remains. So this would still apply, even if we don't have any flies all over the place. Allahu a'lam.
So that's this example, right? The dung, for example, falling in the milk, right?
Mm.
That isn't a hadith.
That's not a hadith. So that's contextual. Right. All right, so from this hadith we see that if this fly was najis, if it was impure, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not have commanded us to dip the fly inside, right? If it was not excused or overlooked. And analogy is made to any dead flesh that does not have flowing blood. So a fly and any other animal or any other insect that does not have flowing blood, this would apply to as well. All right, so with that, we've come to the end of today's session. Anybody have any questions?
Just a quick one. What was the Arabic word for tanning?
Dabgh. Dabgh. Dal, ba, ghain. Yeah. Yeah, questions? Mm.
If you got a scratch on your hand, like, and the blood comes out, and this comes out a little bit, how do you know when you're broken? If it flows out or?
Good question. Blood does not break wudu, according to majority of scholars. In fact, I think it's only the Hanafi madhab that blood breaks wudu. The other madhab, the blood does not break wudu. So blood is not something that breaks wudu.
If it flows from the place that it comes out, so if you like pop a pimple, for example, and the blood doesn't flow, like the Hanafis don't consider that to be working with it. It has to flow out.
Okay, so even according to the Hanafis, there's some details if the blood flows. All right, but the other madhab, the blood does not break the wudu. Now, that's different from saying the blood is impure. It's two different discussions. All right, there's one discussion, if blood comes out, does it break your wudu? No. But is it still impure? Yes. Yeah. So if it comes on your clothing, you need to get rid of it, but it doesn't break your wudu. It has nothing to do with wudu. It has to do with purification, making sure your clothes is pure.
Because a lot of people the assumption that it breaks the wudu,
Yeah.
I've seen brothers run, make wudu again,
Yeah. As we said, this is a position of the Hanafi madhab that when blood comes out, it breaks the wudu.
So like a nosebleed wouldn't, like that's fine?
So it wouldn't break the wudu, but whether it's impure and it gets on your thing, that's
So you have to see some blood.
yeah. It doesn't break the wudu.
How about somebody else's blood? Like somebody else, like your doctor or nurse or whatever, their blood gets on you.
So it's impure, right? It's impure. It doesn't break your. It doesn't have anything to do with wudu. It has to do with purity of your clothing, or purity of your body. Remember, we said that for the salah to be valid, your body has to be pure from any impurities, and your clothing, and the place where you're praying. So if an impurity gets on one of those three things, then this affects the validity of the salah. So if the blood of somebody else gets onto you, blood is impure, as we said, then it needs to be purified with water. All right, but that has nothing to do with wudu. Wudu that's a separate topic of what are the things that break the wudu. But amongst the things that break wudu, blood coming out is not one of them. Normal blood, of course. When it comes to the menstruation, that's a different issue. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Yeah.
Concerning the urine of the camel,
Mm-hmm.
and look at the thing before when I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Is that najasa, the camel's urine?
Yes.
Because someone knows a sister who had cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and they say if you drink the urine of the camel, you get cured, and they said that the sister was cured. Is that good of her to drink that urine?
So this actually comes from a hadith. There is a hadith in which there was a group of people. They came to Medina, and they got very sick. And some people have suspected that they had something, either cancer or something like it. So they had some kind of sickness, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them to drink the camel urine. And they drank it, and they were cured. Then later on, they actually betrayed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they killed the shepherd, and then he went after them. But they were cured because of that. So, but the scholars have debated: is this something that was specific to those individuals, or is this general that applies to everybody? But those who say who give that treatment, they're basing on the hadith, in which Rasulullah told them to drink the camel's urine.
Is it just the urine or the milk?
Specifically, it was the urine of the camel.
Yeah, that's a good business.
Yeah, but that doesn't really change the fact that it's impure, right? That's a different discussion. Whether it has a cure or not is different. But essentially we would say that this is a specific situation. All right, specific situation where Rasulullah told them a specific, he gave them a specific treatment that might not be applicable to everybody else. But I mean, if she did it and she was cured, Allahu A'lam, maybe that's a sign that it is a treatment that is general. Allahu A'lam. All right, any other questions?
What was the situation on a dog seat, on these dogs, and when they get washed, they kind of move, right? And the water is spilled.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Something there, we get some of that. Right.
Yeah, but what is coming on you? The water?
Well, the water from the skin from the
Yeah.
hair of the dog.
I mean, yeah, if it gets on you, then this would be considered to be impure, and you would probably have to get rid of it by the 7 washings.
The dog took a shower, that's why he shake off the skin.
Right, but once that water touches the dog, it becomes impure, and now it comes back on you. You become impure now. Yeah.
So we say the dog, is impure. We allowed to have a dog, like say, like as a watchdog, or like say you live in a farm and you have a dog as a watchdog, hunting and things like that. Is it
Yeah,
allowed?
that's allowed. Hunting, and this is even in the Quran. Allah mentions the dogs used for hunting. All right, the kalb is mu'allam. So this is allowed for guarding and hunting and so on. These things are allowed. Now, in the house is a different story. There's a hadith that talks about the dogs in the house and the angels will enter and so on. Yeah.
The rulings of impurity, even if you have a watchdog,
Yeah.
apply.
Yeah, the rules of impurity still apply. Yeah, it still applies. So if you have a watchdog, obviously, you'll probably be better off carrying, some soil with you all the time, or something like that. Something like that.
So if you have a dog that's an emotional support animal,
Mm-hmm.
do you think some of that would still apply?
Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. That's.
Like dogs
Uh,
for the blind,
yeah.
people who are traumatized, because of trauma,
Allahu A'lam.
lonely Americans.
Maybe. Any other questions? All right, a few announcements. So next week, well, I think most likely will be the last week of this series. So we will need to have a part 2 of purification, because obviously we haven't covered things like wudu and ghusl. So there will be a part 2. But for this particular series, I think most likely next week, because the week after next week, so a lot of people may be out and so on. So we won't have class for that week. So, and then after that, we'll maybe start a new series on a different topic, but After that, we'll come back to purification. So at some point, we will come back to purification and finish it off. When, we're not exactly sure yet, but at some point we'll finish it off, but we will have a part 2 to that. Second announcement, we have family lecture tomorrow after Maghrib, so everyone, inshallah, we invite everyone to come out. We'll have dinner served for everyone. And lastly, we have refreshments prepared for today. So we thank Sister Nafisa and Mubina for providing refreshments for this week, as well as all of those who have provided refreshments in the previous sessions. Any other announcements we have to make? That was it? Okay. All right, so we'll finish off this series for next week, inshallah, and then move on, and then we'll announce what will come after. So we'll conclude with that. Everyone is invited to take part in the refreshments in the back. I think the sisters have it here. جزاكم الله خيرا. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.